So what are we talking about here? Firstly, this slide that looks like it's, an error, is basically just to illustrate this is what our week looks like. Okay. If you pray 5 times, 5 junctures in every 24 hours, typically your first one will be as you get up, the first thing you do when you wake up. And then it's prayer and it's life, and it's prayer and it's life, and it's prayer and it's life. And obviously there's different ways to kind of, divide up your um, or to conceptualize the time that you have on this earth. But essentially, especially when prayer is such a cornerstone kind of activity as within the timetable, if you like, of a believer, then this is really the way to think about it. You've got prayers and you've got the stages between prayers. And it's almost as if prayer is this kind of, milestone, or almost like a flag post, like something that marks a pause, right, in life. And then you carry on and you're off to do whatever you do. And then you reorient yourself back and you carry on, and then you reorient, carry on, reorient. Just seeing it like this, can help, right? For you to think about, okay, the question basically is that we've talked about, everything in orange, if you like. You can't dismiss the effect, just as we are trying to unlock the benefits of the prayers into life. You can't dismiss the effect of the way you're living your life on your prayers. And so if you want to take your prayers to higher and higher levels, then you're going to have to look at other aspects of your life in such a way that may aid or synergize with your prayer, right? So thus far, if you like, we've been looking at the prayer itself and thinking, okay, how might we and what can we do within the prayer uh, to improve the experience of the prayer itself, to bring those benefits into life. But now we need to look at it the other way around. So again, possible or problem, I'll just try to each time just to kind of lay out what the possible issues might be here. And again, there could be more than what I've listed. That can come up perhaps later in the Q&A if you don't think it's dealt with. So this is kind of what we've already been discussing. It partly, as I said, related to the mindset thing, but it also, relates to the life stuff, right? So you don't feel the benefits of prayer impacting other aspects of your life. You're like, okay, well, look, I get that the prayer is supposed to have, bring me these various kind of benefits and stuff, but I'm not, can I honestly say this is the question, right? And this is really, again, a really useful way to reflect on these things. And again, the more honest you are with yourself or with someone that you're talking to about this, perhaps at home or a friend or whatever, the better, right? The more honest you are. Like if you say, to basically ask yourself, remember like I asked that question in the first session about like if prayer wasn't obligatory, how would you feel about it? Would you still do it? Right? That's a really, really, really useful question to ask. If it wasn't obligatory, would I still do it? And that reveals so much about the reality of our motivation and how we see the whole thing in the first place. Similarly, here, the question here is, okay, well, can I honestly say that my life, the way I experience life, different aspects of it, is better as a result of praying? Or if I just stopped altogether, would it make a difference in how I experience the rest of my life? Again, that's a very useful, reflective question, just to think about what is the positive benefit here, because it's supposed to have positive benefits for the rest of your life, as we've covered briefly, and I will cover again today. Another possible issue is that praying feels unnatural, disjointed from other aspects of your life. So again, this is we did discuss it in the mindset stuff. But the point here is that again, is there a flow between what's happening in your life, generally speaking, and the prayer itself? So is it a natural flow from one to the other, or does it feel like almost like an abrupt kind of jolting sort of feeling, right? As something disjointed from the rest of what's going on. The final issue here is that life habits are affecting the quality of your prayer without you realizing it. And this is the key one, and this is where maybe we'll spend most time. Okay, so let's get into it a little bit. Now, key benefits of prayer. I mean, I think these 5 capture really mainly what the key benefits of prayer are in terms of what it's supposed to bring to our inner world, if you like, in such a way as to support us and to help us with the rest of our life. Perspective, centeredness, these 2 are very related. Peace, humility, and courage, right? So perspective, you come into prayer, whatever's going on in life, should, like, it should allow you to see it in perspective. Simply the act of raising your hands and saying Allahu Akbar, and then the rest of our statements of the Allahu Akbar, God is greater, God is greater. Simply that phrase said meaningfully can really support us in and remind us about the fact that whatever other issues and whether they be things in life where we feel things have, we've been successful and perhaps we might be getting ahead of ourselves, or whether we feel really challenged and things are difficult. Either way, Allahu Akbar, right? God is greater. So again, the idea is that the attention or the focus should be very much oriented into like the divine presence. And it puts into perspective these other ups and downs of life. Similarly, from an emotional standpoint, right, it brings us into a center point. If you imagine that circle, right, a whole circle of emotions, and we may be, the ideal perhaps is just to be balanced and centered in the middle, and we find ourselves thrown around, right, in the day between all sorts of different feelings, right? There could be frustration, there could be anger, there could be upset, there could be it could be joy, there could be, all sorts, right? It could be envy, could be arrogance, could be all sorts of things going on. The point about the prayer is again to bring us into a center. I don't think there's any emotion really that can't be almost processed, if you want to say, right, through an effective prayer. Um, Peace is obviously a massive part of it, especially with the sitting position, to find yourself in a state of peace and calm. With the bowing and the prostration, right, we generate humility. I mean, putting your face on the ground. And it's funny that, or ironic that even though we put our face on the ground, sometimes we don't feel the associated humility because we've become so used to it. But if you think about it for a second, what you're doing, right, that's a significant thing, of course, to put your face on the ground and the associated humility. And critically, courage as well. Prayer as a cornerstone for social transformation, for your um, motivation to be out there doing something meaningful on behalf of the one before whom you have just stood, bowed, prostrated, and sat. That's significant as well, and that comes through in a lot of the wordings as well. Now, these are things just to be aware of, and this kind of call it checklist or this list of emotions and feelings is a really useful one to have. You can keep it in print this, whatever, screenshot it, right? And just kind of to evaluate your prayer, right? Either each time or at the end of a day, whatever, just to check through this list. And again, just as a useful kind of reflective thing to think about, well, did I feel my prayer today brought me perspective? Okay, on what? How? That just, if you're a journaling type person, you could maybe, write a bit on it as well. Perhaps it would just help you reflect. Did I feel that it was centering me? That if I was having an emotionally difficult time or an emotionally volatile time, did I feel the prayer was a place where I was able to process this and feel more centered, feel more at peace? And then similarly with the others, right? So again, just a way to evaluate and to reflect. Now, these are all things essentially which are in one way, shape, or form mentioned in Revelation as part and parcel of the benefits of prayer. And there are other things too. One other one, perhaps I should have put on here as well, is the quality of self-restraint as well, right? The idea that prayer is um, is a like a guard for you or a shield for you, in the sense that it would, because it increases your God consciousness and therefore should help you or create a buffer between you and the possibility of going wrong or falling into temptation of or doing basically doing wrong things. So various things. So these are things for us to think about, to reflect on. In fact, I'm just going to add that on there because that way this can be complete. All right. Now, so that's that part. Now I want to look at the issue of the the connection between your experience of prayer and your experience of life, and these analogies will be perhaps helpful for this. So one analogy I give for the prayer sometimes is putting your phone on charge, right? We all do this every so often. You've got to put your phone to charge, and uh, you know, usually, not always, but usually when it's on charge, we're not necessarily looking at it or dealing with it. We often then come back to it, right? And to pick it up again. Now, this actually just partly illustrates a few different things. Number one, in this analogy, is that, well, firstly, you can connect the phone, right? You can put your charger into your phone, but as with the prayer, unless there is an actual electric kind of connection, if you want to say, right, you've actually switched on or have, sort of flick the switch on the socket. Unless you do that, right, the charging is not going to take place, right? If there's so you can the phone from a distance can look like it's charging, but if there's no actual um, electricity flowing, there will be no charge. And sometimes you might have experienced going back to your phone after having left it there to charge, and you realize, well, I didn't actually flick the switch, right? So it was connected, but it wasn't, nothing happened. The charge has gone down. That's like praying, but without being connected, and therefore it's not really bringing any benefit. You are left just as, um, uh, well, weak, if you want to say, or uncharged, or demotivated um, after a mindless prayer as perhaps you were before. Whereas, of course, the emotion, there is a certain, call it a dopamine hit, call it whatever, right? That we experience when we go back to our phone and we see it's charged 100%, right? We can take it off, we're ready to go, right? Or for those of you who have like electric vehicles, right? There's a different psychological feeling you have when your car is at 100%, right? Or if it's at 10%. So the point being is that this is to illustrate, firstly, that the importance of the substantially what's happening in the prayer, but then also the effect afterwards, right? So that effect where you feel motivated, charged, able to do things. You now have reserve in the bank, right? So you can use your phone, you can do things and do whatever you do, right? And freely and confidently. And it's a similar idea with the prayer in life, right? Like off the back of that prayer that has fulfilled its function, right? It should then flow into the energy that you get from that, the type of energy you get flows into the rest of your life. So that's one kind of perspective. But these other two, I suppose, are more related to what I want to talk about next. One is checking in with your boss. So in a typical employment situation, and you maybe experience this already now, as you are now, or you have done, or you will do, where in most employment structures, there's some hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, there typically is a receiving of instructions from above. And every so often, there'll be a formal check-in, right, with whoever it is to see how things are going, right? You share some things, you hear some things, you get some feedback, you set whatever common agenda there is, together, whatever it might be. Now, think about this in the context of prayer as well. You're reporting back to God, all right? You're coming back into a direct communication, a direct engagement with the divine. Whereas we spoke about before, especially in the context of the communication, there is a sending and a receiving. There is a back and forth, right? We're certainly saying things, and we would also hear things, if you like, if we pay attention. We will receive the guiding effects, okay, of being in a situation and being in an engagement where we're actually asking for guidance. And why wouldn't God give that? Why wouldn't we have more of a perspective, again, as we spoke about, and a view of how to move forward on certain things if we were truly present in our prayers? And so in this context, God, in this sort of boss analogy, is as benign as listening, as appreciative, as aware, right, of everything else. Like so, like the perfect boss, if you want to say, right? So you're going to get what you want to get as long as you're engaging seriously. So again, somebody who's going into that meeting with their boss in an employment situation, but is kind of a bit lazy, a bit clueless, not really communicating clearly, looking here, looking there, and just not really engaged. Okay, well, what's that going to result in? Not a great relationship, obviously, right? Um, so that's one part. The other part here is even if you sit in the prayer, or sorry, sit in this meeting with your boss, and you engage in a way that is serious, uh, and you are following, you have fulfilled sort of objectives into a certain standard in the past, but going forward, you're engaging in this kind of interaction. But in many cases, sometimes it is the case that what is said in the interaction is not then reflected subsequently. And perhaps it might be for some people that actually they have no intention really of, that it's all putting up a show, right? The reality of their work is that they cut corners. The reality of their work is that they are not really interested, right? And so these meetings and interactions with their boss are simply checkbox exercises, right? Where they're trying to just get away with the bare minimum. Now think about here then the difference between, or the importance of having a coherence, right? A coherence between the meeting with the boss himself or herself, and what happens in between these meetings. Think about also in that context, taking a break on a journey, right? It could be a car journey, could be a hike, could be whatever. Every so often, you might have to take a break. There is a coherence between the taking of the break and the journey in between the breaks, right? You have a clear destination. There is an end goal. There is a destination on a journey, right? There's no journey without knowing where you're going, essentially, right? And when you take breaks on the journey, the purpose of the breaks is to allow you to continue on the journey in such a way as to get to your destination in uh, in an effective manner, in a manageable way. Now, again, the importance or the thing to think about is the correlation between what happens in these breaks, how long the break is for, the extent to which it does actually support the purpose of continuing on the journey towards the destination. Now, you can have a scenario where somebody is taking breaks every so often, but they're not really thinking about the end goal. They're not really thinking about the destination. And in between these breaks, and I know in a journey situation, it's like a really odd thing to do, but this is the funny thing when we think about our prayers and life, this is where the oddity can be sometimes now, is that imagine a situation where a person is set out on a journey, right? Has a clear objective perhaps to begin with, but then takes the breaks and through the breaks and in between is just all over the place, right? There's a breakdown between like the or a loss of coherence between uh, the pausing and the traveling, such that the traveling no longer is ending up towards the destination. So suddenly, all of a sudden, almost the purposefulness of the whole exercise has dropped, right? Starts to collapse. Similarly with that checking with the boss. So these are two different types of things, right? But although what's clear about both of these is that in both scenarios, there is supposed to be a clear objective. There is effort, there is striving, there is movement towards the objective. And necessarily along the way, there are pauses that are supposed to be synergized with whatever is going on to move towards the objective. This is what prayer is, right? Life is about devotion to God in its totality. Prayer is pausing along the way to reorient yourself, to remind yourself about what your goal and your objectives are for, boss capital B before you, whom you stand. And he's also the objective. He is the end of the journey, if you want to say, right? And therefore, the problem is that if the periods of time in between the prayer are not actually moving towards the objective, the same objective as where the prayer is supposed to be oriented itself, you've got a real problem. It will be just as crazy as these scenarios where we've just talked about, where there's just all of a sudden no coherence between the meetings and the work in between, or the pauses in the journey and the traveling in between. And you end up in either a bad relationship, right? Maybe getting fired in that case, or just going round and round in circles and not really going to any particular destination, which is almost close to a definition of insanity. The key word is coherence. Is your prayer and is your life moving in the same direction? And you realize in the end, right, and this is to bring into context the stuff that we spoke at the beginning, is that the reason to pray is the reason to live, right? The reason why you pray is the reason to live. And your objective in prayer is your objective in life. And of course, in one word, that is the reason and the objective is the divine, is to reunite yourself with the divine, not just in the prayer, but in life itself. So when this happens, your prayer takes on a completely different meaning and feeling. When your life feels like it's doing the same thing, that your life almost feels like salah, right? And salah feels like life. Okay. Then all of a sudden it's like the question of disjointedness doesn't come into it then. There's a natural flow because the bowing and the prostration and the offering of praise and the exaltation and the invocation of messengers and prophets, all of this is coherent with the way you're leading your life, the way you've structured and oriented the rest of your life, the point of the rest of your life. Where our objectives in life and our activities in life have nothing to do with God, really, are not really serving him, or we're only doing things in a similar tick box transactional kind of way, that is what our prayer often is going to look like. So this is where, we can't just become different people is the point, right? I mean, we can change as people, obviously, and we can transform as people, no doubt. But if, you're not going to be able to do that, back and forth, where, um, you know, you, what I mean to say is you can't become a devoted servant of God for each prayer if you're not a devoted servant of God in between prayers. Now, just as with the prayer, there are levels, right? You can fulfill a prayer where you're just meeting minimum obligations. And you can live a life where, as far as God is concerned, you're just meeting minimum obligations. But again, there's a correlation between the depth you will achieve in your prayer and the depth you will achieve in your life, and a synergy between these two, based on a deeper and further concerned exploration for what is the kind of relationship I'm trying to establish here. So all of those relationship principles, the communication principles, even the movement principles, right? Because the moving towards God and orienting ourselves around Him continues in different ways, right? In between the ritual or set movements of prayer, right? All of this can be all explored at much deeper and deeper levels when we start to think about purpose at a deeper level. So just as we've done that for the prayer itself, which is, I think, a must, if someone wants to go further, to explore and to have an experience of prayer that is on another level, you need to do a similar thing in your life. So there's two things here, right? So one is the objective of life and the objective of prayer, and then to think about where is your attention. It's a similar idea. And it comes back to this thing that with the prayer, we're concerned about where is the attention, right? And then you will reflect on it and you will feel a niggle, or worse than a niggle, you might feel upset or frustrated if in the prayer or afterwards you realize that your attention was elsewhere, right? We don't want our attention to be elsewhere. But then I ask you, outside of the prayer, where is your attention, right? If your attention is not on God for most of the time or all the time outside of prayer, why do we think it's just going to switch on easily in the prayer? That's the reason. It's because that most of our lives often are not even governed really by what we think a divine orientation really requires of us fully, right? But then we struggle in the prayer itself. And then we wonder, sometimes we do the micro kind of techniques or micro addressing of things without realizing the bigger kind of, the bigger picture here. So where is the attention? So what should you do? So this is the final kind of slide, and these are kind of for consideration. We can discuss more maybe in Q&A, and maybe you can share some thoughts as well, right? What do we do with all this? There are three things here, okay? So you need to identify activities, habits, and concerns that in three broad categories, I would say. Number one, what are the things that you're up to in life? I'm talking about things that you do regularly, mainly, yeah? That distract you from your Lord altogether. Like, you just know, not only does this not have anything to do with God, right? It's not motivated by that, but it is actually like negative. It's just an actual complete distraction, right? It's like ungodly, yeah, devilish or going that way. What are those things? Many of us will have something, right? There might be something that we get up to, we do, we engage in, that is a complete distraction from your Lord altogether, right? So the kind of doom scrolling through completely ungodly content, yeah, and sometimes, like, just has nothing to do. There's just no, it's not meaning that it's not just ungodly in the sense that we're not remembering Him. It's just not of benefit, really. Yeah, it's just mindless entertainment. Okay, if you, the more you are consuming anything that you would consider to be sort of just some mindless, vain, empty, sort of meaningless entertainment or content, consumption of any sort, then like that, well, let's just say there's nothing I can do for your prayer, right? There's nothing you can do for your prayer. That's just a problem, right? So again, what's driving it? So because that's all of the minutes and the moments, right, where God is not in your mind and heart outside of the prayer is a problem. So you have to address that, right? These are fundamental things. I mean, this is just like, whether you're coming at from a kind of faith-based perspective, a God-centered perspective, or just from a completely secular well-being perspective, right? Doesn't matter which perspective you're coming from. There is no good in that. Okay. And so that's something to pay attention to. That's just one example, but there could be other things too, right? So you need to think about about that for yourself. And then there might be things that are lawful, perhaps. They are lawful, but they're not motivated by complete devotion to God. And here, perhaps one of the best examples might be literally our jobs and careers, right? Here, oftentimes, you know, take away the money, take away everything else, or what have you, like in terms of inherently the work that we do, because that's where most of our attention goes, right? The studies that we're engaged in, if you're younger or studying or you're involved in some kind of study. Why are we studying particular degree courses, postgraduate degree courses, particular qualifications, professional, vocational, whatever they might be? Why are we studying them? What for? Right? Is it so we can serve God better? Is it really? It's an important question. I mean, that's what we're here on life to do. So what is the purpose of that study, that learning? And I'm not saying it can't be. Most things can be for God, right? But it's also true that most of our motivation when it comes to we have this incorrect conception of like there's a worldly activities, and then there's religious activities, right? This um splitting into two is a mistake. Yeah. We can be motivated in how we give our time, energy, attention, our life, right? And we need to think about the kind of work that we're doing. Is the work that we're doing, the places in which we work, are they conducive to a life of remembrance, of devotion, of spiritual kind of centeredness, of well-being, or not? Are they conducive to that? Is one way to think about it. And another way to think about it also simultaneously is that am I here in order, as I said, in order to manifest my devotion to God? This is critically important to reflect on. And I know that's a big question. That's obviously what a lot of that other program, the Last Day Leader course, is about as well. But I really think these things go hand in hand, right? The extent to which one is motivated in that way, in one's life and orients one's life to a higher purpose, the prayer takes on a different kind of feeling and meaning, right? You feel that you are coming back to your Lord as somebody who's trying to represent him in your day-to-day life, right? Not as somebody who is just outside of the prayers, just, basically doing whatever they want to do for worldly reasons. Now, that's not to say that there aren't worldly motivations, let's say, but I think worldly motivations are not supposed to be end motivations. Yeah. Worldly considerations are supposed to come in the context of objectives that are for God. And this is really important to think about. And even if we say, for example, in certain cases, because a classic thing that occurs, and of course it's completely reasonable and understandable that a person will think to themselves, well, I'm pursuing a particular career path, or I'm working at all because I need to provide for my family. Okay, fine. But then think about that. Is that family provision like the way you're providing, right? The kind of work that you're doing in order to provide at a particular level. Is that again motivated by what you think God requires of you? That again, it's your manifestation of devotion to your Lord to provide at a particular level, to live in a particular way. Again, these are quite important things to really tease out. Why are these important? Because there's subtle ways in which actually false gods can come into it. Prestige, uh, fame, money, wealth, actually dealing with the deep insecurities that we have about future provision. All of these types of things, which are all dealt with in Revelation as things that we need to kind of be conscious of and not fall for. Again, these are things to realize. If we live, therefore, in a very transactional sense for the world, then that's the kind of mindset we'll have. It's very difficult to then go all relational with God in the prayer if, in life, generally speaking, we are not motivated by him for the major things that we're doing in our lives. So again, that's an iterative process. Prayer also prompts that reflection, of course, in two different ways. As I think I may have mentioned at the beginning, when we ask for guidance on the straight path every day in Surah Al-Fatiha, you are effectively asking God to for you to be able to use your time and skills, your energy to serve him, to move towards him. And we say, whose path is that? The path of those whom you have favored, right? And the people God favors are prophets, are righteous people, are people who make incredible sacrifice for God's agenda on earth. They're moving forward the faith agenda on earth, right? These are really high up there. Now, I just think that it's important for us to, all I'm saying here is that uh, is just for us to reflect on our aspiration. Because if you have high aspirations with regards to your salah, you need to have high aspiration with regards to your life. The two come hand in hand. Also, of course, in the prayer when we sit and we invoke the Prophet, peace be upon him. You know, when we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, etc., we're asking God to raise the reputation of the one who best manifested uh, and showed by way of example devotion and commitment to God and to spread his message and to elevate God's name. And we're asking his work to be on his name to be elevated and his work to be blessed. But if you think about it, who's going to do that or make that happen except for us, right? If all believers just give up on that or don't really think about that clearly on a day-to-day basis, and that's just not by clearly just your kind of day-to-day ritual practice, you know, it's because of the way you engage in society. When you look around, you look at community, you look at society, and you're concerned. What are you doing? How are you facilitating faith? How are you facilitating the straight path? Because that's the prophetic way. That's the one whom you're invoking in your prayer, you're greeting in your prayer, even, right? So you can see now there becomes a disconnect between asking for guidance on the straight path, invoking the names of prophets, not just Muhammad, peace be upon him, but Ibrahim, Abraham as well. But then in our life, we just go about our life and oftentimes motivated by quite base worldly objectives, right? Very self-centered, you know, there's a clash. So this also needs thought. Finally, identify activities, habits, and concerns that would assist a greater connection to God. There are other forms of communicating with God and contemplating the divine. So the various Arabic terms like tafakkur, contemplation, tadabbur, pondering of the revelation, especially, dhikr, remembering God, taqwa, being mindful of God, dua, of course, calling upon Him. All of these different things can take place outside of the prayer. Again, to think about how are we relating to Him, generally speaking. And this is where we can call into question again, we can apply similar principles that we've spoken about in this program to our other verbal kind of practices as well, such as especially dhikr in remembering God and dua, calling upon Him. Because these things are also often done in very kind of straight-jacketed ways sometimes, and ways that prioritize number and form over substance and natural kind of engagement. We don't often ask our Lord in our plain language. We don't often communicate or express to the divine in our normal way and spontaneously, right? In our normal sort of languages that we use. We always are asking, what's the Arabic word, what's the Arabic phrase for such and such a thing, for example? Or we are more obsessed with, you know, saying a certain formula a certain number of times, okay, than to say each of those things meaningfully and deeply, right? So if you're somebody who, for example, after Salah or elsewhere, you know, you repeat phrases such as Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, right? These axiomatic phrases. I mean, these four phrases, I mean, they capture basically everything a human being pretty much needs to know, yeah, and orient their life around. But again, just as you know, with the prayer itself, like there are a million levels, if not more, of how you can say those things. So what I'm saying is that again, just is to just um, think about the way in which what can you do to become a deeper person in the way that you are, increasing your knowledge of God, your understanding, reflecting your own life, even just being in nature and surrounding yourself in and detaching from the kind of very often urbanized techno kind of crazy environments that we're often in. All of these things can have a significant effect on your mind, your body, your soul, in such a way that again would assist your prayer being more natural expression of relationship. So various things. I've just given pointers, right? These are things for you to figure out, for you to reflect on, for you to think about. And then what do you do with all that? Well, you start redesigning your life. Yeah, like that's a journey I feel I've been on, you know, with ups and downs, of course, but conscientiously for a long time, right? And iterating, constantly iterating and trying new things and thinking about, you know, okay, well, you know, what is distracting me and what is, you know, how do I kind of orient myself in ways of try to be of greater service. And yeah, just to think about all those various influences and stuff. And yeah, I've messed up many times, yeah, no, completely at times, right? No doubt. But it's God wants sincerity and effort, and you will fall and fail. Like you have, there will be parts of your life coming, and it's not that I want it to be the case, but it's almost certainly will be the case where you will be completely distracted, right, from your purpose, and your prayers will feel like they're all over the place, right? That will come, right? There are these, but it's like as long as the trend line is positive, there will be ups and downs, but the trend line, can be positive and will be positive and can keep being positive from now until the very end. And it's important, I think, that you really think through that. Finally, one point I'll make, and then we'll pause for any questions, is that, I just want to remind you about that thing about, simultaneously, before you start your prayers, seeing if you can to think about this idea of praying as if it's your first time, praying as if it's your last time. Both of these two reflections come with very different but very, very helpful kind of emotions, right? Praying as if it's your last time, we often say it and it's a cliche, we hear about it, but really, really, if you get yourself into that zone, you realize then what is this all about? Pray if it's as if it's your last time, reminds you about the fact that the whole point of this prayer is essentially to prepare you to meet your Lord. It is a meeting with your Lord that prepares you for the ultimate meeting. It's basically practice. It's basically the thing that um, purifies you, right? Lowers your attention to the world and to yourself and increases the attention to the divine. That's what it's about. And if you were praying for the last time, you would not end your prayer until you were completely free of your worldly attachments and you were completely free of your egotistical attachments. Because you know that after this salam and this salam, I'm gone. And I don't want any attachments because the one who's attached, their transition is going to be painful, right? And they'll be clinging, right? They'll be clinging. As we cling to this world and the things of this world, we'll be clinging at the time of death. You're not just going to switch on into max piety just because things have just now you realize, right? We'll cling, you know, if we're attached in that way. Each prayer is a detaching process. And so really to think about that and to pray with that motivation, to really demonstrate and to internalize that level of kind of seriousness that you have about the endeavor that you're in, and to pray as if it's your first time with a freshness, with an anticipation, with a kind of a sort of um, an innocence, if you want to say, and a and with a kind of a curiosity almost. How's this going to be? What's it going to feel like? Right? So it gives you again more of it expands the sense of possibility, okay, as you go into your salah. Where oftentimes we just go in and go through the thing and finish it, and it is as if nothing happened, right? Because it's just become a routine. But each one, honestly, is like if you really see it, and I'll tell you just straight, I'm pretty transparent with these things, right? There are times that I have felt prayer as a burden, right? It's just felt uncomfortable, felt disjointed. It's not right. Yeah. We don't really feel the inclination. Or you start asking like why, and you just, especially in those winter afternoons, right? You've got like 3 hours or whatever, Do you see what I mean? Like that's natural. You will have this. But when you have that, and at the same time, right, I've had prayers where I think I have left Earth. Yeah. Like I've gone somewhere else, right? And everything in between. So the thing is, I suppose in my experience, like it's like when you experience different things, you know what's possible, right? You know how you can be and how you can feel. And um and you realize that when you're zoned into it, right? And just in actually for me teaching this program that in the last month, it's been very helpful just for me personally, to be honest, as well, right? But you realize that actually when you bring some of these principles together that we've been speaking about, like you will experience it as the best thing you do in your life if you don't already. Not as a kind of, again, a kind of just a claim, but as an actual feeling, like your most enjoyable thing. The thing which even the Prophet, peace be upon him, said was his highest delight. That was his highest delight. To be in prayer, to be in salah, to be standing, bowing, prostrating, sitting. That's where he was at ease. That's where he was most comfortable. And it makes sense, and I'll finish with this. It makes sense because, as I may have said before, but I'll say it again, right? And it's a really important thing perhaps for you to take away and to think about. If we can't feel comfortable and at ease and at peace and in complete tranquility and just away from the world and away from all random distracting thoughts and everything else, if we can't feel these things in our salah, then unfortunately our claim to want to be in divine company in paradise, I don't think stands up. Because if you can't be in peace for 5, 10 minutes, right, how are you going to manage eternity, right? And such a person, unfortunately, will require the purifying process in the hereafter before they can feel at peace in paradise, right? That's the point there. The point of, you know, it is, and we are here to purify ourselves now. Prayer is that purification now, that thing, that process to help us right now, to prepare us to be and to move closer and closer to that divine connection that then becomes completely and utterly unbreakable and unshakable. So may that, materialize for all of us more and more and more over our lives, and may this become the most meaningful and connected and enjoyable and experience that's full of tranquility and full of all of the benefits that we have spoken of.